Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 33,000 members. In this episode, we ask, what makes a good prison governor? There are probably as many opinions as there are members of the POA, but the answer to the question really matters to prison staff, as the governor is the most senior ranking manager in most workplaces. It is also not an idle question, because a good governor exerts significant influence over the working lives of prison staff. So it is important to know what makes the influence positive and should be encouraged, and what makes it negative and must be avoided. In this episode, NEC members Jackie Marshall and Ian Carson discuss that key question: what makes for a good prison governor? With me are NEC members Jackie Marshall and Ian Carson, and we're here today to talk about what makes a good prison governor. Now, many POA members tell me when I speak to them that they regard their governor as something like a captain on a ship at sea, huge discretionary power. But whenever the Prison Governors Association, the Union for Prison Governors, gives testimony to the Parliamentary Select Committee, they always say that they get the blame for stuff that they can't control. Nevertheless, there do seem to be some characteristics that make for being a good governor. And with their unrivaled experience, I'm here to chat to Ian and Jackie about what those may be. So you're both very welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you think back over your own careers and you think back about the members and the reps you've dealt with, what would you say was the most standout quality that good governors have? And why is that so important?
I find governors who've actually worked on the front line as an officer grade and have a full understanding of what officers do, and then have gradually worked their way up through the ranks, are easy to deal with because of that knowledge that they've got.
And do you find often that most governors have had that experience, or is there an influx of people who have come from outside and therefore don't almost intuitively get what can work on the landings and what won't?
There's a mixture, really. Some have come direct across, some have come from outside, some have come up through the ranks.
And Ian, if people have not come up through the ranks and therefore that bit of their skill set is missing, as it were, how easy do you think it is for prison governors to acquire that? And what do they need to do to make sure they are properly informed about what the reality is like for the prisons in which they are in charge?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is totally agree with the first point Jackie's raised. I think that's the most important thing a prison governor needs, operational experience. Although I will say that if they come in at director level where they have less contact with staff, it's not that important, in my personal opinion. However, if you've got a prison governor who doesn't have an operational background, as Jackie described, then you spend an awful lot of time educating them, and you tend to get an awful lot of arguments and disagreements simply because they don't fully understand where you're coming from. Having an operational background gives you a balanced view if you're a prison governor. And it also makes you a little bit suspicious when people are giving you assurance that things are going really well, when actually you know that they're not. I totally agree with Jackie's comment. That's a really important part of what makes a good prison governor.
And I suppose if prison governors don't have that operational experience, then to be effective, they need the humility to recognise that that's something, a gap they need to fill in their skill set, and to work collaboratively with the union to make sure that happens.
Okay, one of the other priorities I put down is being a good listener. That fits in nicely with the comment you've just made, the ability to listen and understand people's points of view. We've got hundreds and thousands of years of experience in the trade union. We've got some branch officials that are extremely experienced. The ability to sit and listen to those people is something a good governor will have and will recognise as important. Jackie and I have been in the job many, many years, and the better governors always drink in all of the experience that we've got when they deal with us. The poor ones won't.
Do you find, Jackie, though, that when there's a crisis, as there often is in this overstretched and dangerous environment, those key qualities of listening, of sitting down and drinking in the experience from those who've got more experience, goes out the window?
Sometimes it does. And when there is a crisis, that's the time when they do need to sit down and listen. That's the most important time. Aside of a crisis, when you've got good industrial relations in a prison, you'll generally find that the staff are happier and the prison's running better. I remember in one of my establishments where we'd had a concerted indiscipline on one of the wings, which were juvenile prisoners, and they'd actually battered one of our members of staff unconscious. And our tornado teams were going to go in and take the wing back into our control. And the governor actually said to them as they were going in, "Don't forget the children." Well, they completely destroyed the wing. They'd injured our staff, and that's all the governor's concerned about, the children.
Yeah, I mean it's true, but it's also a huge failure to read the situation and offer appropriate support and guidance, isn't it?
Yes.
Ian, have you had similar kind of almost like horror shows that you can recall where things have just gone wrong?
Oh, on a number of occasions. Some of the biggest problems I've had in prisons that I've looked after have been caused directly by the governor simply not wanting to engage and talk to the trade union. It caused absolute turmoil within the prison. I'm not going to name the prisons. I don't think it would be fair, but I think if you work there now, you would know I'm talking about you. Prison governors have simply thought they were feudal barons running their own fiefdoms and weren't really interested, even in comments made by their own SMTs. I know because I knew some of those junior members of the SMT were trying to guide and influence the governor. So alongside the union, some managers, and yet prison governors simply wanted to drive the prison off the end of the cliff. And you see that on a well, it's not that regular, but you do see that. And there's an absolute correlation between a well-performing prison, as Jackie said, and the relationship with the trade union. There's a direct correlation. If it's a good relationship, you tend to have a good working environment. I'm not saying HMIP will give you, all golden stars for the way you're running your prison, but you'll have a better working environment if you're a member of staff. And I think that's what Jackie said earlier.
And is there a problem sometimes that actually things are negotiated by you and your colleagues on the NEC and the full-time officers with the MOJ or with HMPPS, and you think you've got an agreement that covers everything across the estate, across the public estate anyway, and then there are some governors who just don't get it, and what can be done when that happens,
I don't know if
Jackie?
it's a matter of don't get it. Some governors just completely ignore it. I mean, we've got things going on now where we got prisoners under the influence where they've been taking drugs and they can be quite poorly. We need to watch them, keep an eye on them. But some governors have developed a local form. Well, we have no policies for a local form. We've got other places where we can record incidents like that. And the national instruction's gone out that nobody's to use a local form. And then we've just found in one area, they've developed a policy and they've put a local form in it for all prisons in that area. When those at the top are saying you can't use a local form.
And presumably when your colleagues who represent members in that prison say, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is not what should be happening," what's the response?
Well, not all committees are aware of what they're saying at the top. Governors are informed, but we try the best we can to get information out to our committees. But if they're not aware, they'll go along with it. And then once they've started doing it and they become aware of what the policy is, to try and get some governors to change their mind then is really difficult. And if you're starting with the disputes, if you're running everything by disputes when your governors are not listening to your branch officials, it just becomes a nightmare for everybody.
It's exhausting as well as kind of dangerous, I guess, isn't it? Ian, would you say that if there is good and effective industrial relations in a prison, then the local POA committee will get information not only from Cronin House, but it will actually be openly shared by the senior management team and the governor?
Oh, absolutely. There is absolutely no doubt about that. We have some really, really good governors who work closely with the trade union, who will prison governors will often kick back at some of the things that they're told, but the trade union can kick back in a different way. So when you've got a really good close working relationship, we can do things through our channels that prison governors might feel reluctant to do because they'll simply be told to get on and manage it. I mean, I can give you an example if you want.
Please.
So during the benchmarking process, when prisons were benchmarked back in 2011, 12, 13, there was a process in the benchmark where you could challenge what the benchmark said. And Home House had 220 challenges to the benchmark that we'd written down where we
Wow.
opposed the benchmark. But 60 of those challenges belonged to the SMT, the senior management team, and the governor. And the agreement we came to was that there were issues for us. there were issues for management, but because management felt reluctant, because that meant they were pushing back against the area manager, we would take them on and they would become trade union issues. Actually, they were joint issues. Because of the relationship we had at the time, we could quite happily do and say as we thought right for our members. Managers could sit in the background with a smile on their face, knowing that actually some of these issues were theirs, which they would have found difficult to take back through their management line. So that's how it can work. When it works well, and of course, good IR feeds into that. And Jackie's already said that, but good IR can mean the difference between your members being dismissed on a code of discipline and not dismissed on a code of discipline. And that's the bit where we get some real benefit from good industrial relations.
Absolutely. Jackie?
Yeah, I've had times when working for a governor as a branch chair where IR has been almost non-existent. Staff have been running round, they're tired, the DEP's not allowed to make decisions because they are being micromanaged. And from one governor leaving on the Friday, to another governor coming in on the Monday, and it was like the whole prison went, "Whew, thank goodness for that." And within a couple of weeks, the whole prison was turned around.
Right. I think perhaps listeners to this podcast probably realise it, but those out from outside the prison service probably don't realise how immediate both the good and bad leadership is in this environment. So, what do you think it needs to change to ensure even responsible and effective and proactive leadership by governors?
I think they should be managed better by those above, because we have governors who completely ignore policies and do their own thing. And then sometimes when we go to those above, they just support them. We've got governors who do wrong, and if it was one of our members or a uniform member, they would be dismissed. Very rare you'll see a governor dismissed. They more often than not just move sideways or moved out of an operational place and go and work in headquarters.
So double standards is an issue?
Oh, definitely. And we quite often ask for the code of discipline for band 6 and above, because most of the time it's only being applied to those below.
Yeah. Ian?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I would say. Training's really important. We run some very, very good quality training. We do it ourselves. Jackie will do training for her own branch officials. I imagine I've just finished, just before Christmas, a 2-day workshop for my area where industrial relations took up most of the first morning. And it was a joint presentation. So training is really important. We do that for our branch officials. I would like to think that we can do some of that for managers as well, because the experts are people like us and our branch officials, the NEC. I would like to see the senior people in the prison service emphasise the importance of policy compliance to managers and sticking to policy, and Jackie's mentioned that. And we have to realise that the result of a prison governor failing to comply with policy can be an employment tribunal and can be a huge burden on the taxpayer. I was told that the prison service paid out last year in excess of £27 million for in the courts. That's about the bill to run a Cat C prison. I may be a little bit behind the times. It might be a little bit less than that. But the figures actually in the prison service's own submissions look like that figure's around about £49 million. Now, if the taxpayer is shouldering that burden for prison governors not complying with their own policy, to come back to the point that Jackie made, then that's simply unacceptable. Part of our role, I think, as a trade union is to show managers, actually, this is what the policy says. This is what we should be doing, because the result of any failure means that the taxpayer shoulders the burden, and that is completely wrong given where we are with the current finances of the country.
Well, it's avoidable, isn't it? I mean,
Absolutely.
And you can see the problem, 27 million quid, say, being wasted, but you can also see the solution, in the sense that the union is running courses on these sort of key issues anyway. It would take not much to reconfigure the courses to say, okay, senior management team come in either as well or in a separate course, and then everyone has the same information in the same way.
Absolutely, and people like Jackie and I could do that. Jackie could facilitate that. I could facilitate that. That's within our skill set to go out. I can only speak personally. I've got some I've had some interesting conversations with the AED and PGDs around doing exactly that. But the people who have to sign up to that are prison governors. And so far, the silence is deafening, because it's a bit of for some of them it's a bit of a hurdle to get over, having the trade union coming in and teaching them what they're supposed to already know. But we
Yeah.
could do that. Jackie and I could both do that, and so could our colleagues on the NEC.
There may be some POA colleagues listening to this thinking, well, that's all right for them. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen in my prison. I can't get it to happen in my prison. What sort of pressure or encouragement can be applied, do you think, locally to get senior management to be more cooperative, more responsive?
I would have to say, from instructions from above their grade, from their managers. Like Ian says, we've got lots of time, and Ian and I think we joined within 2 weeks of each other in 1990. So between us, we've got probably about 69 years experience.
Yeah.
Some governors we get nowadays, probably Ian and I have been in the job longer than they've been alive. But unless they're going to listen and be managed properly, I don't think we're going to go get any further forward.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the problems of the prison safety and reform white paper back in 2016 and setting up these 6 reform jails was almost to promote the idea that governors had almost much more discretion than in reality they probably have. Do you see any signs that government or the MOJ or the HMPPS are taking a step back and thinking, we didn't get that quite right? Or is there still a pressure to head in not the best direction?
I think the biggest example of that was with benchmarking, what Ian mentioned earlier on, when they lost thousands of years' experience by basically buying people off and getting experienced people out of the job. And the prison system was on its knees. And rather than say, oh, we've cocked up there, we'll have a new initiative. Let's bring in offender management in custody. Let's bring in OMIC with key workers, and we'll put staff back on the landings again. And we'll run the key worker system. That's one of the biggest things where they did cock up, really. Yeah. And they had to put it right. But rather than admit they've got it wrong, they'll bring something else in. I don't know what you think about that, Ian, because you were involved in that.
I totally agree. Totally agree with your comments, Jackie. I'll just to go back to something you said though about prison governors not having a lot of power. I think that's poppycock, to be honest, because when you speak to prison officers today, and part of my workshop, I asked local officials to highlight the priorities for their members, and these are the priorities that were on the board on the day. Staff don't feel that they're being supported; they're being bullied and victimised. Well, there's a report in front of the prison service now by a lady who's conducted a very, very thorough investigation into that, and so far the prison service have failed to release it. And it mainly focuses on the behaviour of managers. This report, that's what I'm led to believe, and lo and behold, the prison service have failed so far to release it. If you're going to put this out, shame on them. I'll say shame on those people who've got a report that shows how their managers are behaving and failed to address it. And I'm not saying sack all the managers. I'm saying we need to retrain some of these people and refocus them. So that's one of the things staff will tell you.
Yeah. So transparency is important as well in that.
Vital. Time off. Prison governors are controlled time off that staff get. Annual leave, which is the same. Prison governors control that. Violence in prisons. Prison governors can deal with that. Drugs in prisons. So all of the things that our members know are real problems day to day are actually in the hands of prison governors. So I think it's poppycock for them to say that they can't control pensions and pay. We know that. But when I did this exercise, pensions and pay never came out. These were the things that our members, through their branch officials, were saying were important to them. Some prison governors are really good at dealing with this. They're the better ones. I think Jackie might agree with that. But some of them would rather see prisoners wandering around landings, playing ping pong and pool aimlessly than dealing with violence and drugs. And they're the poor managers, the ones that need to be sorted out, in my opinion.
I think the things that came up at your workshop Ian, that you've just shared with us. That's almost like a checklist, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Any POA rep could take that almost like on a scorecard, I suppose, and just say, okay, how does my governor shape up on these things that are the key issues for the members? And we know that because it's the members who have created that list.
Yeah.
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 A very easy example of that is leave over Christmas. So Christmas occurs the same time every year. We all know that. We all know that what regimes you're going to need and what staffing levels, because it runs on a weekend regime. But you've still got some prisons don't get their Christmas detail out until the beginning of December.
Yeah.
So staff can't plan
Yeah.
of what they're doing because they don't know when they're going to
Yeah.
be at home and when they're at work. And it's so simple to do that a lot earlier so staff can plan and staff are happier.
Yeah.
So that's, a simple example of where governors can improve things for staff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's almost like a failure to recognise that makes a big difference to staff, huge difference to staff and their families. And,
It does, yeah.
and therefore it needs to be sorted out sooner.
Because managers will have all their leave booked.
Yep.
They'll all know early on what they're doing. But the frontline staff and the uniform staff don't. And really acceptable.
It doesn't breed a productive working relationship, does it? Because people immediately think double standards again.
Yeah. I think to follow on from what Jackie said, if you think of yourself as a good governor and you haven't got your Christmas leave and your annual leave for the following year done in September of that year coming to Christmas, then I will tell you that you're not a good governor. That actually you might be ticking the boxes, but it's a very, very simple thing to do. It's really important to staff, as Jackie's just spoken about, and yet you haven't done it. So actually, it used to say Bovril on the side of London buses, but none of them ever sold Bovril. That's the term I use.
Yeah. Yes.
You can say what you like. It's your actions. That's what count for staff, and staff know that.
Okay, and so if there was one thing that a bad or a suboptimal governor, use that phrase, could do to improve, to meet the standard, what's if there is just one thing that, if you had magic wands and could guarantee that all governors would behave like this, what would it be? Jackie?
Listen to your staff and listen to your branch officials. Stick to your policies. And if you've not worked on the front line, then go back to basics and spend time on the front line with the staff on the landings and just get an understanding what a difficult job that they've got.
Okay, that was 3, but there were 3 good ones, so that's
Sorry.
that's fine. Ian, can I make the same offer to you? What 3 things would you hope that all governors would do?
I think Jackie's nailed it. I would just add, meet regularly with your committee and your area representative. I've got diary meetings where I go in and have a cup of coffee with the committee and the governor, and we talk about a range of issues. And even if it's nothing important to discuss, it just builds a relationship where if something goes wrong, you can pick up the phone and you can make things happen before the prison falls off the end of a cliff. Got that relationship. You're a prison governor. You need that relationship.
Yeah. So if there are prison governors who are listening to this, I suspect there will be a fair few. Don't be the Bovril on the side of a London bus.
Don't be the Bovril.
Actions, not words. My thanks to Jackie and to Ian. And it's clear that being able to maintain a good, constructive, respectful relationship with the POA scores very highly indeed with both of them. Encouraging good management behaviour is just one of the many ways in which the influence and effectiveness of the POA is expressed. And to find out about the full range of campaigning, representational and organising work the union carries out on behalf of its members, visit poauk.org.uk, where all the information you need to join the union, should you not already be a member, can also be found. Thank you for listening. We hope you have enjoyed what you have heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.